I wonder if I could do a penis boop. All right. All right. Okay. Here we go.
Boop. Nope, that was a real chode.
Mine was good. Mine was real good, but there's some ejaculate coming out of that
I
penis
can't make
faux show.
dick boops. I can't make dick boops, Megan.
Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold, but I think if you listen carefully,
Nature was intended to give you appropriate
a healthy, happy sex life is the most wonderful and terribly unpleasant. We've all experienced curiosity about ourselves and the opposite sex. Who hasn't?
Hello, my witches. I'm Megan.
I'm Colin, and welcome to Remedial Sex Ed. It's week 2 of your sexual Spooktober.
Marcella is unable to join us for this episode because she's winning at life right now.
Yeah, she's out there living her dream.
She is. If you're in the New York City-based area, you can go see her. Or I guess you won't see her stage managing.
No,
if you do,
you should not see her stage managing.
She's not doing a great job. When we were doing an outline for the podcast, I wanted to research pagan sex rituals in October.
Weird sex stuff.
Yeah. Because this is a trope that I've heard a lot, but I know actual nothing about.
No, it seems like whenever paganism or pagan religions are mentioned, weird sex stuff is always in the same breath, the next sentence.
Mm-hmm. And like it's popped up in media quite a lot.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a scene in the Da Vinci Code where the reason why like Sophie's not talking to her father is because she walked in on a weird pagan sex ritual.
Nice. Yeah. I haven't seen that movie.
Oh really?
Nope.
On principle?
Yeah.
Well, it's and then like paganism and sexuality is just so intrinsic, like
intertwined.
Like in Sabrina, not the TV show of our childhood, but the Netflix series, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's dope. It's based on an even doper, similarly dope comic book.
But they are all Satan worshippers, and they're very into sex.
Oh yeah, sex stuff.
Very common.
It gets intense.
So I wanted to kind of research what that trope's all about, where it originates from. Like many other topics in our little our podcast history, as soon as we started going down the research rabbit hole, we learned that a lot of our initial ideas isn't actually what's happening.
Yeah.
And the first and foremost being that May is actually the sexiest month.
It is the sex month.
May is the sex month.
The fertility month. I mean, which makes sense. It's spring, fertility rites, Maypoles, and that sort of things.
Yeah, and I mean, spring, I think, across several different beliefs, is seen as like the rebirth of life. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of animals, that's for like a specific mating season.
The bone-in times.
It's a bone-in time. But despite May being the sexiest month, we are going to stick with pagan sex stuff.
We're sticking with the plan. Although I guess the lesson of our research here was that it's a lot like being a furry. It's not a sex thing until it is.
Yeah, and with this one, I think there is a lot more sexuality with it because paganism is several different things, which I'll get into.
Yeah, we're going to have to take a second to define that.
Yeah, but all of them have a very common thread of being very sex positive. Mm-hmm. With a lot of them, sexuality and fertility isn't necessarily bound to one partner till death do us part.
Right. And I think a lot of that comes from the new pagan religions are like, a lot of them are a direct response to Christianity and people being fed up with the strict legal structure.
But it's kind of hard for you to justify that statement because with a lot of pagan research, a lot of the history was destroyed by the Catholic Church. So it's kind of hard for us to know what it was in the before history times.
Yeah, it's hard to get an unbiased look at these ancient religion because, yeah, Christianity did want to stamp them all out.
Mm-hmm. So when we were doing research, we did actual talking to people with this one.
We did. We went and made some friends. I mentioned in the last episode that we were going to go to Pagan Pride here in Long Beach, which was last weekend. And we did, and we had a great time.
Yeah, it was a small collection of several different booths, of which we saw different kind of pagan beliefs
It was like a spoopy farmer's market.
Yeah, it was a spooky farmer's market.
with a couple of rituals. They had a pretty good schedule of rituals and performances that were going on in the center of the park, away from the farmer's market portion.
And we did actually participate in one.
Yeah, we did.
It was nice. We were given rose petals to put our good vibes and energies into and release them into the air. And
Yeah,
into
we
the
put our
world.
intentions into them and release them to the wind.
There were a lot of people dressed in black. There were others dressed in more flowy clothes. There were a lot of wands, a lot of witch
wands.
hats. We saw a couple furries.
Saw some furries. At least people wearing cat ears and tails.
And it was just an interesting collection of people of what we learned actually believe some pretty different things.
Yeah, there were a lot of different groups represented. There were like Wiccans, which is probably the most popular pagan religion, wouldn't you say? Or the most well-known?
I think it's the most, I think when people think paganism, they immediately go to Wicca. I wouldn't know if it's actually the most popular.
Okay, that's fair. But I did do some Wikipedia-ing, and I think Wicca is the most popular pagan religion.
Nice,
Yeah.
because Wikipedia
is generally a pretty good resource. I mean, you wouldn't write a research paper based on Wikipedia, but it's fine for general knowledge. Megan.
I'm still throwing shade at you.
Don't it? I feel the shade.
So the Pagan Pride Festival actually made me flash back to my childhood a little bit.
Previously on Megan.
Yeah, like my mom has always kind of loosely identified as pagan, but she's also done a very good job of never enforcing her spiritual beliefs on me. Like, I think it was her deepest want for her 4 kids to choose a spiritual path for themselves, and she did an excellent job at it. And I don't think I fully understood exactly how pagan she was until I went to the Pagan Pride Festival, because like I grew up in a house that had rocks and candles everywhere. And like growing up, my mom took me to tarot card readings, and I made a wand, and I once did like a candle making ceremony. I don't remember which pagan holiday it was.
Are you sure that wasn't Pioneer Day?
No, it definitely was not. It was definitely
Pioneer
witch
Day?
associated.
The weird pioneers?
Yeah, and she had like a almost crystal ball in our house. And like now, having gone to the Pagan Pride Festival and looking back on the house I grew up with, I'm like, wow, I think my mom was a lot more pagan than I actually thought she was. But I also think that there's something with being an outdoorsy person, which my family is very light in comparison to your family, but we did grow up camping. There is a lot of like natural eating and like recycling and respecting the earth in my family, that if you're more inclined to be in tune with nature, you are going to have a lot of overlapping beliefs with paganism.
Right. I think that's a really good place to start, Meg, is that a lot of people, myself fully included, get paganism and New Age kind of conflated. And I think there is a lot of crossover. And in some places, like some pagan religions are New Age, but not all pagan religions are what you would call New Age. What's the difference?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't. And I was trying to, because we also made a friend at the festival. We ran into a fellow podcaster. She is Mistress Prime, and her podcast is called Ravens at the Crossroad. And essentially, hi.
It's us. I hope you're listening.
And their podcast is all about interviewing several members of the pagan community. And if you're very curious to have better knowledge on what the differences in beliefs are, I highly suggest you check it out.
Yeah, go give them a listen.
Yeah, we're purely commenting from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, just internet research. That's our basis.
Well, we also went and we talked to her, and she cleared up a few things.
Oh, that is true. We had a great conversation with her. We were there at her booth for like 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah, she was very open and very lively to talk to and very helpful. Anytime we do these sex and religion podcast topics, it's a little difficult because I genuinely am curious to know what the belief is. And I want to know what people believe and I want to display it in a respectful format. But you need to know someone that you can go up to and say, so tell me about pagan sex. And I mean, that applies to all religions, like going up and be like, so tell me about Jewish faith and sexuality. Like, it's a little hard to convey and also be like, I am going to be very respectful when I post this online.
Yeah.
And I expressed that fear towards Mistress Prime, and she was like, why? And, within the pagan community, many people are very open about their sexuality and their sex life and how sexuality plays in with their faith. And a lot of that has to do with a much more positive view towards uterus havers and justified gender fluidity within a spiritual belief. And when it comes to sex and many pagan beliefs, there's a celebration within human fertility, and there is a celebration within sexual creation that isn't necessarily human life. Like sex as a creative act, that doesn't necessarily mean that sex is leading to a baby, if that makes sense.
Right. Sex is either the creative force itself, or it's like emblematic. It's like an expression of the creative force, right? And it's not just sex as procreation; it's sex itself.
Correct, or that sex between two people can still mean love. It still can mean like a force to raise others in. It doesn't necessarily mean that the life is strictly one lover's sperm and one lover's egg. In episode 1 of Ravens at the Crossroad, they interview someone and he identifies as a gay man, and he says that he felt it very easy to go into the pagan community, and there's actually quite a few members of the LGBTQ community in there. They're still kind of, since sexuality is such an intrinsic part, obviously pagans are open and welcome towards everyone, but working on how to outreach to asexuality is an ongoing conversation. But he said that he believes that many people within the queer community fall into paganism because there is actual like stories of gods and goddesses, or are both, or gender is not a part of it. And there is like just kind of open sex with everyone. Like it isn't strictly defined between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
And since queer is other and paganism is other, others have a tendency to find community within themselves, even if they don't strictly believe the same thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes this like overlapping community that's really easy to fit into.
Well said.
Let's define what paganism actually means.
That was going to be my question. What is paganism, Megan?
Paganism once was used as a derogatory term towards anyone who believed in polytheism, or belief in more than one god, which is a big old sin in a Judeo-Christian belief. During and after the Middle Ages, it was applied to any unfamiliar religion. So that became a big old umbrella term for anyone who wasn't Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, or Hindu. And that is a ton of beliefs, all put under pagan.
So it's like any religion that isn't a major world religion?
Arguably, but I think...
or I guess you wouldn't call Baha'i or Sikhs pagan.
I think some people have.
Ah.
Right, like that's where it gets complicated. Because you would also argue, like, every realm of the world has had some form of tribe in it at one point or time in history. And those tribal beliefs are now all encompassed under paganism.
Mm.
So I would argue that paganism is actually a major world belief.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think it's just been done in a fairly racist way.
Yeah.
Of I'm going to guess it was the Christian church who started it to
Probably.
control those who believed in either the goddess spirit or some polytheism or anything that was kind of questioning their form of doing things.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And made everyone else an other.
Before Christianity was a huge and powerful religion, like there was no such thing as pagan because most people believed in multiple gods, and the weird ones were monotheists. And so as Christianity became a world power, they had to invent a category, something to otherize, something to call the people who didn't believe like them. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what you already said?
Yeah. Where's Marcella?
Where's Marcella?
So today, the year of our Lord 2019,
Yeah.
pagan is still an umbrella term. And it covers neo-pagan druidry, Wicca/witchcraft, shamanism, goddess spirituality, esatru, and heathenism. Now, those are the big ones, but there are also several other beliefs that fall under that same umbrella, because to say anything that isn't Christianity, Buddhism, the Jewish faith, Islam, or Hinduism, to put that all other under paganism, that's huge. That is a huge definition of beliefs. So you also have people who believe in the Egyptian gods or the Greco-Roman gods or the I said Greco-Roman, I meant Greco-Roman.
Oh, that's fine.
You also have people who are into fairy belief, and like there's several other like kind of mystical and magical beliefs that go underneath there. There's also Satanism, which I found that at the Pagan Pride Festival there was kind of a complex relationship with Satanism and paganism, which I can understand, because one huge misconception about especially Wicca or witchcraft beliefs is that they've been called brides of Satan in the past. They are this group that believe in like creation and happiness and pouring good into the world, and to like associate them with brides of something that is like the Christian emblem of all that is evil just doesn't make sense. But there was also the Church of Satan at the Pagan Pride Festival, so I'm very confused as to what the relationship is within the pagan community. And
October would have been a good month to look into that.
I know. I'm very confused as to what's going on there.
Yeah, well, there was one group there at... Hold on. Podcast break.
I'm Satan.
It's so spooky.
I'm Satan.
Yeah. Okay, so the group that was there. So I couldn't find their website because it's down, or we're having bad internet or something. Or maybe I just have too many tabs open. But the group that was there is called the Synagogue of Satan, Sin, S-I-N. And the way that they're described on the Pagan Pride website is this: the Synagogue of Satan exists to give subcultures and minority religions a legal right and connection to their beliefs that can be used in a court of law, such as housing, job discrimination, and harassment, and ensuring religious rights while in military services. So the group that's there, it's the Synagogue of Satan. They were dressed all in black. They have that provocative name, but I think, judging from that description, they're just doing that to be provocative because they're an advocacy group. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they actually worshipped Satan. So
what about the Church of Satan? Because they're the group that sued Sabrina for using the kind of like they have that same statue.
Yeah, they're real. They wanted to copyright that statue of Baphomet that they used in Sabrina, which for those of you listeners is a statue of Goatman with big old horns holding up 2 fingers.
Who is the devil?
Who is the devil? Or a devil? He's Baphomet. I don't know.
He is the devil, though. At least in the show he is.
Well, now I have to look at it. Doesn't matter, because in the show, that's how the devil is depicted. And the devil has been depicted a lot of different ways over the years.
Okay.
A lot of the times as a goat man, though.
Or at least there's like goat-like features, like the horns or...
And the hooves. Mm-hmm. Yes. Which comes directly from old pagan beliefs, actually, or Christian appropriation thereof for their own purposes.
So I was going to talk about how I kind of struggle with the pagan umbrella term in comparison to like the Christian umbrella term, right? Because you use Christianity to describe several different groups, right? And you use paganism to describe several different groups, but it's not the same umbrella.
No, it's not the same thing. Like Christianity describes a bunch of different, you might call them sects of the same religion, or a bunch of different religions with a common root.
Well, I was going to say, like, this is going to be my outsider, godless heathen opinion, but I think the different Christianity groups are incredibly similar, and really they just get into nitpicky differences that people get very passionate about.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they all are here to interpret the Bible. And I guess Mormons have the Book of Mormon on top of that.
Well, and Catholics and Protestants use a different Bible.
Yeah, but it's still incredibly similar.
Oh, yeah.
Like, incredibly similar.
And more than that, all of those religions, you can, like, draw their genealogy on a tree, all going back to...
Exactly, whereas I'm going to...
5th century.
Take 2 examples that I listed in the pagan umbrella. So you have shamanism, and it has many roots around the world. A shaman has also been referred to as a medicine man, a medium, or a healer. A shaman believes that everything in the world has a spirit and has wisdom to share. Shamans go on a journey to communicate with other living and non-living things, and then they kind of act as like the wise man and are used to heal others. Whereas asatru and heathenism is a specific belief in the Norse gods. And that is a huge difference.
Yeah, big old difference. And we spoke to people from both groups. Or no, we didn't speak to any shamans.
I wish we did.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I would love to speak to a shaman. So amongst pagans, there are some common threads, like respect for nature and earth. Like that is a pretty common thing you see amongst all of them. Neo-pagan druidry believes that spirituality is everywhere. They are also polytheistic, so they do have specific gods. No figure of supreme evil.
Oh, interesting.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I don't like the black and white
Yeah.
of like good and evil, and I kind of like the more complex gray, let's have a discussion about the pros and cons of this, which is why our first 5 episodes of the podcast were 90 minutes long.
And they're back and forth.
Yeah.
Which is, it's just good.
And then you have some similarities between Wicca/witchcraft, and there is a difference between those two, but I'm not ready to go down that road. That's a totally different podcast topic.
Yeah, I think it's all Wiccans are witches, but not all witches are Wiccan. Is that fair to say?
I think so, but I'm not well educated enough to answer
Fair
that
enough.
definitively.
We'll leave it alone.
Yeah. But goddess spirituality is specifically belief in embodiment in the divine as female. So whereas a lot of those other kind of pagan beliefs kind of have gender fluidity between male, female, and genderless, goddess spirituality is very like femininity is everything. Now, I give complete credit to the pagan community, because if you go to a pagan pride festival or any form of like support websites, they do all come together in this one umbrella community, despite the fact that they're all incredibly different, and they all enjoy each other's time. which is to be said a lot better than some of the other 5 that they get compared to, which have fundamentally the same beliefs and get into actual wars about the differences. And I think there's something to be said for groups of others that are able to unite and be kind and loving for the greater good. And maybe we should all just learn a little bit from the pagans. Actually, most of these beliefs date way before Christianity. They date way before Buddhism. They date way, way before Islam. And actually, a lot of the Christian holidays are specifically taken from like the Druid or Wicca calendar.
Yeah.
And that's because most of them are aligned to the equinox or the solstice.
Yeah.
Just reusing holidays.
or more specifically, the political purpose of changing holidays to suit a Christian purpose. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Solstice becomes Christmas, yada yada.
The only one that some of them are not older than is the Jewish faith.
That's how old.
Yeah, because Jewish faith is 4,000 years old, whereas the Druids didn't start popping up until about 200 BC.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. And so it does depend on which one you're talking about. Obviously, if you're into the Egyptian gods, you definitely win.
They might be among the oldest. Yeah. Or I guess you could say, well, okay, so when you talk about goddess religion and to a certain extent Wicca, that's sort of a reconstruction of the oldest religions of all, the fertility cults, fertility religion. They're an attempt to, you might say, reconstruct or revive or continue the lineage of some of the oldest religions that we know of or religions that we don't know of because there's no historical record from prehistorical times. But the most common, the oldest human artifacts are always idols and depictions of fertility goddesses, that sort of thing. So we can guess that the oldest religions were fertility-based.
Truthiness.
Yeah, and so the point of the goddess religion is to revive that oldest religion.
I think there's also a valid point in that being the oldest. As we've learned on multiple occasions, it's actually significantly hard to get pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
And if you imagine trying to do it without the marvels of modern medicine, I can imagine that fertility in the survival of humanity being like your number one focus.
Totally right. I mean, it's hard enough to get pregnant, harder to stay alive during pregnancy or have an easy pregnancy, harder again to keep all your children alive. I mean, that was a person's number one concern for like so much of human history.
Mm-hmm. It all makes sense to me. I see the logic in all of this and in the belief of healing properties of certain herbs or minerals, which is common through most of these. I also get because there are calming purposes of like lavender, sage can bring a sense of calm to the room. Like I see where people become very devout in these beliefs because when you have like natural remedies as like your sole basis, I think I might be, I don't know, is there paganism without directly believing that I am magic and just believing that the world is magic?
That's a good question.
I might be that.
Well, there's animism, which we touched on briefly, which is the belief that everything has a spirit. But I guess that would include you too.
Do I just need to have faith in myself, Colin?
I think you need to believe the real magic was inside you all along. And I think there are varying beliefs on like whether or not you can manipulate magic to do something for you.
Yeah, but it seems like the more I listen to the podcast, most of them seem to believe that they can manipulate energy or magic in some way.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the more we kind of researched at the Pagan Pride Festival, it kind of became clear that pagans are still not really seen in the best light. Like, it's still very controversial to be one. They had a lot of legal rights groups because we touched on this with polyamory. Of if you are polyamorous, if it comes up in like a child custody court case, they might find against you, and that's true with paganism as well. It can be used as a character slander against you. It can be used in a job situation against you, even though in this country we're supposed to freedom of a religion, it shouldn't. Mm-hmm. So despite the fact that we no longer do witch burnings, it is still a stigma. And that's why a lot of people are still in, as they say, the broom closet.
Yeah.
And apparently to come out to your family and friends is called coming out of the broom closet. That's something I learned.
Mm-hmm. Talk about stigma a lot in this podcast.
We do.
We never talk about stigmata.
We just slammed the Christian church a lot. I'm sure we're going to wake up with stigmata tomorrow.
Fair enough. So what were we talking about?
So that was just kind of to clarify what paganism is, what the stigma is, and like also to kind of clarify some wrong beliefs in it. I already mentioned that I'm sure that there are some witches out there that don't mind being associated with Satan. It's kind of like an anti-streak in them of trying to be like anti-Christian. So that whole rebellion thing, I'm sure, is part of it. But it sounds like when I was talking to Mistress Prime, she was not on board with being associated with Satan. Mm-mm. And it sounds like, and I know that from a lot of members of the pagan faith that I've met through personal connections, they're not associated with Satan.
No, we didn't meet any Satanists there.
Yeah.
Even the Synagogue of Satan, I'm not sure that they believe in Satan. I think they're just an activist group.
I will come full out and say that there was like this minor fear in me as like Colin and I were walking up towards the Pride, of seeing like booths. Like obviously for a lot of Celtic Druid believers, they will fly, Scottish or Welsh or Irish flags. And there's a lot of white people a lot of white people in kilts.
Yeah, whenever you see too many white people having culture, you start to get a little nervous.
Yeah, especially when it's like a pride festival.
Yeah, pride thing.
And you're like, oh no, Nazis.
Yeah, like, oh no, is this a racist thing?
And then
but it wasn't.
It wasn't. It really wasn't.
It was the farthest from, actually.
Yeah.
And it was still pretty white, but it's Long Beach, so there were lots of people of color there.
Yeah, so there was a diverse group there. Like, we were not at any form of racist rally, and Colin actually flat out asked about it.
I did. I mean, I couldn't not ask about it because I was talking with the heathens, a gentleman who represented the Troth, which is a specific heathen group. They worship Norse gods, Odin, and that sort of thing. And, I asked him, like, I told him that I find this stuff interesting, but what keeps me away from learning more about it is I don't want to run into Nazis. And I was, I was blunt, but I was trying to be polite as possible. But he said the same thing. He was like, yeah, we also don't like Nazis, and we work very hard to keep our, he admitted that our group is pretty darn white, but we try to be, we're still not perfect. We try to be as inclusive as possible, and we definitely try to keep any racist element out.
And that's a for real fear because, like, a lot of, is it the KKK that still uses rune stones or rune symbols? I
don't know. They're pretty Christian. They're very Protestant at the KKK.
But they do a lot of like pagan shit.
Yeah, that's true.
I forget which hate group it is that uses rune stones, but you'll see that, or like how
they'll
Nazi
use runic symbols, or what's that symbol that looks like the three triangles?
Oh shit! Yeah, that is a rune stone. I forget what it means. But yeah, like things that are historically pagan and still mean something to pagan believers that have been like twisted and used by hate groups.
Right. They're these far-right white identitarian groups that want to use Germanic, pre-Christian Germanic or Norse culture as a symbol of whiteness, something that they can hold on to and celebrate. And so they've sort of appropriated some symbols, rune signs, and other pagan symbols for their own use that have unfortunately gotten associated very closely with white supremacy.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify that white supremacy and belief in Norse gods, very different things.
Not the same thing.
Not the same thing. And we actually picked up a book while we were there. It was like Witchcraft for...
Yeah, it was the 2020 Witch's Companion.
Yeah.
From Llewellyn Books, on sale now.
And there was a whole chapter in there called How to Know If You're in a Cult.
Oh, yeah. That's the first chapter.
Yeah. And I think that's important because if you're in a group that is other, like how the group is regulated is going to come into question. So knowing if you're in somewhere that is full of loving people who just believe in magic and the spirituality of the earth, or who believe in the Norse god, or whatever they believe, or if you're somewhere of a group of people that have been specifically crafted to control you.
Right. Well, to tack onto that, I think paganism attracts disaffected people. I think that's fair to say. People who, for one reason or another, have left their birth religion or don't fit in with one of the major religions. And so these sort of fringe, will I call them fringe? These alternate, nope, nothing sounds good. These smaller, maybe newer religions attract people who are already outcast. And those are people who are easy to take advantage of. Mm-hmm. And that's how you wind up in cults.
So that is a true thing to be afraid of, but not all pagans are cultists.
I mean, yeah, your neighborhood Christian church could be a cult for all you know.
Oh, yeah, there's been a ton of Christian cults throughout the years.
Yeah, we're just begging for hate mail today.
Oh, yeah. Where's
Remedialsexed
Marcella?
at gmail.com. No hate mail. Please don't send us hate mail.
She's usually the one to shut this shit down.
Help us, Marcella. Send us your spirit.
Maybe if we do a seance with the candles, she'll arrive.
We do. Listener, I wish you could see our candles here today. It's so spoopy. It's actually not spoopy. It's very calming. Mm-hmm. It's a little spoopy. The right kind of spoop.
So
Spoop.
That's what paganism is.
Spoop.
That is the longest intro into what it is.
That was like over an hour.
No, it wasn't. We're only 40 minutes in.
Oh, okay.
That was kind of our intro into paganism. It was important to me to define everything I learned, which is what is the differences between all of them. I already knew some stuff about like the falsities that are associated with the group, but I thought it was important to say it again on this podcast. And it's not directly related to sex, but it was important to me to give them a fair shout out for anyone who might have incorrect beliefs.
Yeah. And there is definitely, I mean, sexuality is a part of is an important part of a couple of these pagan religions. Yeah, especially the ones that are attempting to recreate the oldest fertility religions of all.
One thing that is kind of cool about paganism is within the Christian faith, you're kind of born with sin, and like you're supposed to kind of spend a life cleansing yourself of sin, whereas in paganism, when you're born, you're just born pure and born good. And it's the actions that you do on earth that swing you one way or the other with energy. Like, you don't have to atone for anything. Like, the belief is, since you exist, you are good. Mm-hmm. Which is quite a positive spin on it. And I think it takes a lot of pressure off. So that's paganism in a nutshell. Let's talk sex.
Yay!
We finally got there. So, the sexiest time is May. Mm-hmm. And the sexiest day is May Day.
Yes. Sexiest day is May Day.
That is my birthday, by the way.
Yeah, it's Megan's birthday.
It's my birthday.
It's also the real Labor Day.
It's my birthday.
It's my birthday.
Everyone get naked and dance around a Maypole.
Naked, dance around a Maypole, start a riot, kill your boss.
No, don't do those last things. Colin, go in your corner.
Now, it's May Day. May Day. When I was a kid, we did a Maypole at my school once.
I did a Maypole too.
Yeah.
Mine was, the one we did was at Wheeler Farm.
Oh, Wheeler Farm. Yeah, we did mine as part of the Spring Carnival.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. My mom was instrumental in starting it, too. Just kind of interesting.
Dude, do you think your mom's into weird pagan sex stuff?
I don't want to think about the sex stuff, but I think my mom and my dad had a little bit of New Age influence there back in the 90s. I think everybody did. Everybody was into...
Oh, everyone was, yeah.
Essential oils and herbs and crystals, like we are now. Things just sort of... All this has happened before, and all this will happen again. The wheel turns.
I don't think it ever went out of fashion.
That's true. I think it's definitely more in fashion right now, though.
It was very in fashion in the 90s.
Very true. Very true. Very true.
Yeah, I danced around a Maypole as well in...
The nude.
No, not in the nude. I was 5, and it was at Wheeler Farm. It was very closed. And I think Maypoles are still common celebrations in colder countries. So, like, it's still common in the Norse countries, and I think it's still a thing in, like, Russia.
Oh, to do a Maypole?
Yeah, and I think it's because spring is such a big deal if you live somewhere where it snows like it's Armageddon.
It does make you want to dance around.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can leave my house and not lose a toe. You know, like, that's a great celebration.
It's interesting that we both separately did maypoles. It leads me to believe that it's still pretty common, which is weird because it is directly 100% a pagan ritual
Oh,
to
absolutely.
do a maypole.
May Day is also referred to as Beltane. Beltane is the time of the marriage and the union of the goddess as Mother Earth and the god of the greenwood. This is within the Wiccan and the witchcraft belief, specifically. May Day makes an appearance in basically every pagan faith, but this one is specifically Wiccan.
And they all seem to celebrate.
It's all about boning.
Yeah, it is all about boning. But I was going to say they all celebrate the same holidays.
Oh yeah, no. All of them have something on the equinox or the solstice, and they all have like some variations of something in between. So May 1st would be in between the spring and summer.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so spring equinox, summer solstice. Beltane is the time of the marriage and the union of the goddess as Mother Earth and the god of the greenwood. It is an ancient fertility festival marking the beginning of the planting cycle. The festival was to ensure a good growing season and a bountiful harvest. Beltane in lighthearted and joyful. Oh, sorry. Beltane is lighthearted and joyful. So spring is very frequently associated with the celebration of life or the creation of life. So that description was the family-friendly description that was on display at Pagan Pride. Now, if you talk to anyone about this festival, they'll tell you that several Maypole dances within the Wicca community is done in the nude.
As they should be.
As they should be, because it is a fertility celebration, and then there's just banging in the woods.
Just banging in the woods.
Just banging in the woods. And historically, when this was celebrated, it would happen between kind of strangers, or you didn't have to be married to bang someone in the woods. It was just for the purposes of creating life. Like if you take away the marriage component, if you think of humanity as a community, it makes it a little, like the marriage thing, a little bit more of a compromising topic.
Okay, I see.
So that is Pagan Sex Ritual number 1 that I have. There is a pagan ritual called the Great Rite.
And to be frank, I was trying to research this and I couldn't find a lot of info on it. Is it real?
Yeah, so the Great Rite, a ceremony between an actual couple to gather the magic involved with sex and give it to them as a couple. And from what I can tell, it's reserved for when that couple is in trouble. So it seems like from this research, the Great Rite is more than just sexual union. It is the enactment of the creation of the universe itself in Wiccan tradition. So being able to harness the magical energy within sex and give it to the couple themselves.
That's very interesting.
It can also be referred to as sex magic, a magical tool to symbolize the union of the god and goddess to raise energy and create magical power. And sometimes this ritual is performed by just using symbols of sex, and sometimes it's done as an actual sexual thing. So yeah, it seems like the Great Rite is only performed when the spiritual group is in need of some very powerful energy, because it is seen as one of the most powerful energy forces.
Makes sense.
And this magic is usually between an existing couple. So instead of getting like two strangers to bang it out, it's between two people who already have an intimate relationship with each other, because the belief is the stronger the bond between two people, the stronger the magic that's going to be created between the two of them.
In what little I was able to find, it said that they're usually a high priest and priestess.
Oh, is that right?
And that sometimes you can do it symbolically, where you get a dagger and then you plunge it into a cup of wine as a symbolic bonage.
Makes sense. I'm on board. I like the imagery.
Yeah, symbolic bonage. And a lot of things are symbolic bonage. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and other times it's a big old veiny penis.
Yep. What I like about these sex rituals is the thought that you have at climax is very important. Yeah. Apparently, the sentence says, while it may seem really difficult to hold any clear thought during climax, doing so is a major part of reaching your magical goal during a ritual. Since there's always an intent. When you're casting a spell, there's always an intent. So if you're able to hold that intent during orgasm, it's a lot more powerful.
Okay.
Now, this begs the question. There's been a group of witches that have basically been performing rituals to get President Trump to stop harming people ever since he was in inauguration.
Are they banging? Is your
Yes,
question?
like how many people have thought, please get Donald Trump to cool down during sex?
Personally, I don't ever want to think about that person at any point during intercourse.
Yeah?
No.
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 But do you think if we had like a global bang day where we all agreed to think, let the world just calm down for a moment? Okay, so which day is going to be get President Trump to stop hurting people day, and which day is going to be stop human trafficking, and which day is going to be peace in the Middle East day?
That's a really good question. Probably should do them on a full moon or a high holiday or something.
Yeah, so Halloween is a high holiday in the Wicca faith. That's coming up.
Yeah.
So what is our what is the overarching thought going to be while we all bang on Halloween? We have to agree to this as a group.
What are we all going to think about when we're banging?
Yeah.
At the moment of climax.
Yes.
What do we think
specifically when you orgasm.
We think about the fall of capitalism, of course.
I don't know if everyone's going to be on board with that.
They should.
Sure. But maybe if we did something like the dissolvement of hate groups.
Okay. Yeah, I can start that. The dissolution of hate groups.
The dissolution of hate groups. That's what we're all going to think about when we bang on Halloween. And this is important because I know a lot of you are going to be all sorts of drunk and in slutty costumes, but you got to keep this in your mind.
Write it on the back of your hand.
End hate groups.
Put it in your Google Calendar.
During orgasm.
And when you're climaxing, think about ending hate. Think about all those tubby, pale KKK members taking off their clothes, letting go of the hate in their heart, and just fucking each other.
Where were we? So what I can see is that there's actually, these sex rituals are taken very seriously. There's talismans, there's Eucharists, there's very specific combinations. So
what sex rituals are there besides the Great Rite?
I'm trying to figure it out, but like that's what's been the hardest to research. I think there's a lot of secrecy about putting pagan sex rituals on the internet for people not totally being on board or understanding what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Yeah, I do know.
Do you know?
Yeah, you don't want to make it weird. But in fertility religions, sex is bound to come up once or twice.
Yeah. Oh, there are S&M rituals.
Oh, really?
Oh, where's Marcella?
Where is she when we need her?
It's very powerful to use this during a ritual. The top or the dominant is in control of the energy exchanged during the ritual. And the bottom or submissive may use the technique to enhance their ability to enter a meditative or astral state.
What?
Yeah.
That seems like it would take a lot of concentration.
Yeah, but I mean, like, imagine if sex was part of your spiritual belief. I'm sure you would have all sorts of good techniques to go along with as far as like controlling your mind or harnessing the energy of the room. And most pagans associate sex with personal liberation.
Makes sense.
So using sex rituals to free yourself. Free your mind.
I like that.
erotocomatose lucidity. So, erotocomatose lucidity is an extreme form of sex magic created by the English occultist Aleister Crowley. The purpose of this technique is to help a specific magical practitioner reach a deep state of trance in order to complete intense divination or receive a prophecy. So, you need several other people with the main magician to a constant state of arousal without climax. So practicing tantric techniques until that person is completely exhausted. The main magician then falls into a deep meditative sleep and is again aroused and allowed to fall back into trance sleep. And the act of magic takes place while they're in sleep.
Oh, really? So that's when they're doing like astral projection?
Yeah, so that's a specific sex ritual right there.
Yeah, but again, this is Aleister Crowley, which most contemporary pagans probably don't like.
You have self-pleasure as a form of ritual. It can be as effective as pleasure between two partners, according to this. But the energy is raised a bit different. Wow. Very important rule. Teachers do not have ritual sex with students.
Oh, yeah. That was something that the Witch's Companion, the 2020 Witch's Companion mentioned in the chapter. Well, it's actually a collection of essays. I should really grab the author. Anyway, that was said in the chapter on Is Your Group a Cult? Is abusive power between master and student.
And it also emphasizes in this article that I'm reading right now that sex is seen as a joyous expression, like a very intimate expression of great joy. And so if you are feeling uncomfortable during this, then the magic is not happening correctly. Like you're being abused if you are not consensually happy to be part of this act. Like you should be joyous in order for the magic to be working properly.
Anything other than an enthusiastic yes is a no.
Yes. Basically, I've got like all the different ways that pagans kind of do sex rituals, but very few actual defined ones. So like, I think it's very easy to define what Mayday is, but in terms of like what the other rituals are called, I've got how they do them. I've got why they're used. I just don't necessarily know any more specifics than that.
Well, I think maybe we're misunderstanding the point a little. I think the point might be that there are not specific sex rituals, but sex is the ritual, and the spiritual and magical practices that they're doing in everyday life are just applied to sex because it's a fertility religion and sex is super important.
You raise a valid point. And I mean, the belief that sex is the greatest magic that they can conjure, I understand, because it is one of the most intense feelings that you can have, and there's so many emotions going into it and out of it, and it is very spiritually exhausting.
Yes.
In a very good way.
Yeah, in the best way possible.
I will admit that when we were talking to podcast friend, she mentioned something that made my eyebrows go alarmingly high, and sure made me seem very
jumped
judgmental.
right off her forehead.
Oh, yeah. And granted, I was judging the situation, but she mentioned that for some pagan groups, sex is seen as like initiation ritual. And that made my eyebrows go way up because when I think of sex for initiation, it makes me think of a cult.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's where my mind jumped as well.
Yeah. And it makes me think of creepy men forcing underage girls into unwanted sexual situations. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think if you are in the initiation for sex ritual, you're with a partner that you've consented to, and it is part of this magic gathering. Or I really hope that's what's happening.
I would hope so too. And I think anyone associated with Pagan Pride, that's probably more the case. Yeah. Don't you think?
I think so. I think any situation where you are there without your consent and not enjoying it and not on board, y'all need to leave.
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely.
I guess my greater point is, like, if you think of an initiation sex ritual, like with someone who is consensually going into an open relationship or someone who is going openly into a threesome or to an orgy. Mm-hmm. I think that's more of the vibe. Like they want to be there.
Yeah, I think the case with sex as an initiation, right? I mean, sex is a big part of the group and the religion. And if you're not comfortable with that, then that group's probably not for you.
I guess the reason, like the more I'm reading through this, like definitely sex is a part of it and sex is a part of conjuring magic. But I think the main reason why pagan sex rites got so blown out of proportion is because they're an actual sex positive religion, which does not happen almost anywhere else. Mm-hmm. To interrupt this ongoing podcast episode, as we were recording and listening back to what we had recorded within this episode, we realized that we had some follow-up questions in regards to what we were calling pagan sex, and we decided to reach out to our friend Mistress Prime, and she's been very helpful as to respond to all the questions that we had to her. First and foremost was our question that when people say pagan sex rituals, do they really mean Wiccan or witchcraft? To exactly quote what she responded back to us with, define people. That really depends on who's asking. There are sex rituals in some traditions of Wicca, but not all. She is not personally a member of any traditions that utilizes specific sex rituals as part of its practice. In fact, she's aware that of at least one Wiccan tradition that outright forbids the practice of sex magic by any of its members. Our second question that we had for her was the impression that we get is that sex is a small percentage of Wicca magic and not everyone practices. Is this true or is it more important than we think? To which Mistress Prime's response was, that's true! Sex has a strong presence in many aspects of Wicca, but the exception of Wiccan practitioners to utilize sex as a magical practice is not something I, myself, have dealt with. Our third question that we had for her was, when working with sex magic, is it usual to be between two people or in a large group? Her answer was, sex magic is more common between two people, but it can also be a solo practice. I've witnessed group sex in some instances. The overall point of sex magic is to help raise energy for the working at hand. No pun intended. And our final question for her was, the internet speaks of the Great Rite. Are there names for other types of sex magic? To which her response was, the Great Rite is most often represented in rituals symbolically with the use of the magical tools uthame and the chalice. She has heard of some traditions where the Great Rite is physically enacted by a high priest and high priestess. We would like to thank Mistress Prime so much for taking the time to answer our email and clarify our questions before we uploaded this episode to the internet. And in conclusion, what we learned is that while sex is important within several Wiccan beliefs, the trope of pagan sex rituals or Wiccan sex rituals is greatly overblown by the media. It's a very minority practice. Within pagan beliefs, it's open with sexuality. It encouraged sexuality in order to better perform magic. Mm-hmm. And it is very
it's female-centric.
Female-centric. That's
he
how
said talking over the woman.
So that's how it got so blown out of proportion to have like demon worshipping witches having sex on top of a pile of blood while fire rages around them and demons were raised.
Religions are a threat to that strict patriarchal structure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And especially anything that promotes sex with female enjoyment.
Yeah, female enjoyment, multiple partners, free love, orgies.
Yeah. So I think this was an interesting exercise to find out that it really is a part of it, but it's not all of it.
Yeah, it was interesting to learn the truth. I mean, because paganism and weird sex stuff, just in the public imagination, totally go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And just like furries, actually. Furries and weird sex stuff. And just like furries, we learned that it's not a sex thing until it is.
And from all of these articles that I'm reading, it's always associated with Wiccan beliefs, which is one slice of paganism. So really, when we're saying pagan sex rituals, it seems like we're actually talking about Wiccan sex rituals.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Wiccan or goddess belief.
Yeah.
Goddess religion.
Because, I mean, I don't think that Norse...
No, I don't. Yeah, the heathens, the Norse Norse god worshippers or Germanic god worshippers aren't doing a lot of sex stuff. I don't think. Neither are the Druids. Might be. I don't think so, though.
I don't think they are. Like, every time I look at this, it's just more Wiccans, more Wiccans, more Wiccans.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all about, again, harnessing the magic. I would totally believe that the Druids believe that there is spiritual creation between two people when they're boning. Because if there's spirituality in everything, then the act of love is definitely spiritual.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's actually something that most religions can agree on.
Yeah. Even Christianity.
Even Christianity.
Yeah.
We need Marcella.
We do. We need a third person. Marriage cast.
But I mean, like, when it's just the two of us, we go on these tangents and we don't have, like, an official stopping point because we can just, like...
Structure.
Where's our structure, buddy?
Where's our buddy?
Also, you know that if Marcella was on this episode, she would have researched the fuck out of it.
Yeah, she would have. She would have been on her game, on that good game.
All right, so thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something. I hope you go check out some weird things. Remember the plan. We're ending hate
October
groups.
31st.
On
We're going
October
to end
31st.
all hate groups with our sex magic.
We're going to do it, okay?
Doing it.
Everybody in. All right, hands in.
Hands in. Go team.
Follow us on the social medias. Give us a review.
Please write us a review on iTunes.
And have a very spooky Halloween.
Have a spoopy Halloween. Ooh, weird sex stuff. Bye.
I'm Megan.
Oh yeah, I'm Colin. Bye. Love you.
You will agree that the concepts will contribute to the rearing of a mature person.
An absence of
Oh, yeah, you don't have to be thinking about